Hello and welcome to the Red Couch Theology Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Red Couch Theology Podcast.
All right. This week on our episode, we have blurry video, potentially.
Video, that looks good to me.
Is it good?
I don't know.
Something like that. So this week, we are talking about atonement.
Your favorite subject.
Atonement theories.
You should sing them your new song.
No. So while I go double check the focus of the camera, would you tell them what in the world is atonement?
Okay.
It's a big theological term.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So I have found the most helpful definition of atonement to be this: at-one-ment. So the thing that restores relationship with God, that brings us back simpatico, to grab a Spanish expression. So whereas in the ancient world, atonement was thought about as being the function, the thing that happened after sacrifice, after those kind of processes, suddenly we move into this era where the work of Jesus is the atonement. But then the big question is, well, exactly what was the thing that was in the way of our relationship with God, and how did he remove it? What's the big thing that he dealt with is maybe what I would say.
Yeah. Or another way of like thinking about it is like, what's the mechanics of how the death of a Middle Eastern man 2,000 years has anything to do? Like, is there like some sort of leverage thing going on? And how does it relate? How does it connect? All of those things.
And so broadly,
this is all atonement theories.
Broadly, there's been a few different ways of thinking about that. One is that we owed a debt that had to be paid off. One has been that a death was required to pay that debt off, and so it's a substitution.
So the first one, if you want to get theological, since you guys are all like, while you're driving, you should take notes.
Sure.
So the first one is ransom.
Yeah. So there's a debt to be paid, and Jesus becomes the one that pays that debt through his
ransom
life.
theory.
So he swaps life for life.
Then
the other one is the
penal substitution.
Penal substitution is similar, but has more sense of swapping, right? That like one instead of another. Substitute is the best word there. So it's like
our badness on Jesus.
Yeah, and he moves into our place. So we should have been on the cross. He goes on the cross.
And the reason it's penal substitution is there's a penalty.
Mm-hmm.
There's a badness that we've done that deserves a penalty.
Yeah.
And so instead of us taking the penalty, by the way, if you were in our Alpha class, this was probably the leading story of the talk that was given in the Alpha class last night.
Yeah.
They did mention the next couple ones.
And so then the next one is Christus Victor. And this is the idea, like to translate from Latin, Christ is victorious, or Christ the victor. And so in this one, Jesus has defeated death. So he's victorious over the powers of sin and darkness. Yes. And the death that we now were imprisoned by, Jesus dies and he destroys for us those things. So there's a great picture with Christus Victor that has Jesus rising from the tomb, and he has one hand reached down on one side and he holds Adam in that hand, and he's got one hand reached down on the other side and he holds Eve in that hand. And it's almost like a Superman moment where he's coming up from the grave. The gates of hell are trampled under his feet, and he brings our ancestors as representatives for our whole species. And death is destroyed because Jesus destroyed it with his death. And so that's why, for that theory, there's a saying that we say at Easter, my favorite saying.
He tramples death by death.
Christ is risen from the grave, trampling over death by death. So like this weird idea in some ways that death destroys death. And when Jesus dies, he almost is like a a bug in the system. He dies, and that thing starts to spread and wipes it away. Now, your favorite theory comes next.
No, it's not my favorite.
It is your favorite.
Christus Victor.
You talk about it all the time. Okay, your theory that you like to talk about.
Yeah.
That you're writing.
So, by the way, if you were there at Alpha class last night, the majority of the teaching that I did live after the video, the majority of that was Christus Victor.
Yeah.
Where we talked about the Rwanda genocide. We talked about the principalities and powers, how the evil of humanity almost takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
And that those things are at play in the world. And then the way that Jesus defeats them is by like letting them consume him, by not wielding a sword, instead wielding surrender.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one is sort of like a divine example. The theological term is drawing a blank. Drawing a blank on the term.
Well, that has substitution.
It's my favorite
in it as well, right?
It's my favorite theory that I don't remember. It's recapitulation.
Okay, capitulation.
Recapitulation. So in recapitulation model, which it's not my favorite. In fact, I am really compelled by that one and by Christus Victor, partially because they're the ones that I've spent the most time in recently. I am a huge fan of the things that I'm spending my time on most recently. How's that for a theological framework? Wow. Woo! I haven't heard you laugh that hard in a while. Why was that so funny?
I don't know. It just sounds like a horrible way of choosing your theology.
Doing theology? You know what I'm reading right now? It's
actually just whatever I read last.
Whatever I'm reading.
That feels like a dangerous way to go. But I'm sure you have limits on it.
So,
tell us about recapitulation.
So recapitulation is basically like this divine example where humanity coulda, shoulda, would have gone this way.
Yeah.
And lived this way in order to truly live into what we were designed for. But because we failed, he comes to show us a new example of what it's like to live.
And so some of that has that really taps into the idea that Jesus is the new Adam. This is the first Adam who failed. This is the second Adam, that became everything that Adam would have been. And he's able to do that because of who he is as well. So I think all of those theories have had different controversies around them, different pushbacks to them, different questions about whether they cover everything. And of course, because we're Christians, this seems to be one of our inbuilt flaws. I assume it's a flaw. I could be wrong. We tend to pick something like this, get so attached to it that we can't possibly fathom that anybody else would believe any of the other ones. So because, and I would suggest, we might even talk about this a bit on Sunday, so it might be a touch of a spoiler. I would suggest us as Reformed people, and I don't mean Reformed in terms of our theology, but being children of the Reformation, this movement that was really concerned around theology, we have been more likely to judge people's inness, their value as a Christian by their theology than by anything else. Yeah. So we've had this whole 500 years
where you can be a horrific human as long as you believe the right stuff.
Absolutely. It's become very like even good guys with theology that shaped how we think today, like John Calvin, hung his nephew in a bell tower because he had the wrong theology. So that's been some of our story that we're trying to counteract by saying, actually, all of these theories have some merit in them. Some maybe more than others, but you can hold any one of these theories and still be a follower of Jesus.
Absolutely. Alex wasn't in the class last night, so I'll fill him in as well, or remind those who were in the class, or if you're a regular listener and you're not in the Alpha class, I put up a picture of a book / lecture series called the Mosaic of the Atonement. And I said, if you're a big nerd, theology stuff, and you want to go really deep, it's not a super large book, but in his thesis is similar. He's not the first person to make this case, and far from it. But he does a really, really good job making the argument that in order to have a truly full, robust perspective of what God accomplished at the cross, you have each component is required. And he goes maybe at one step slightly further than some other theologians who say we need them all. Yeah, he actually tries to sort of intertwine them, so that they actually build upon each other. Yeah. Into a full thing. So the mosaic of the atonement, if you want to nerd out about that, and he kind of makes that case. And actually, it was his book that got me slightly interested in the recapitulation theory, and I was like, oh, okay, there's some merit there, because I thought it was the weakest prior to reading his book. And then I started to see some goodness and beauty in it.
But these theories are, I'm trying to think if I can find this ridiculous opening to a book. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it on the spot, but there's this guy who opens his book with this idea. He actually notes as an assessment of somebody else's atonement theory. And this theory just begins something like this.
Is it Rob Bell?
Maybe it is, yeah. He talks about like this whole like stream of ideas about the first Adam and the second Adam, and if the second Adam is the first Adam, then there's also the last Adam, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Yeah. And this guy who's making this assessment of this book says like he gives a clear understanding. And you're like, this isn't clear at all. This is the most confusing thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
But it's just a drone of these different ideas. And so it is a thing that I think all of us might feel like we can get easily lost in.
Yeah. So I want to get a little bit more practical. Why are there, like, you might be asking yourself, okay, great. You just gave me 4 different frameworks and a very, very cursory overview of them. Why is this such a debate? And all those sorts of things. Well, it leads to some of the questions around maybe what I already alluded to. Why does the death of Christ relate to us today? That's when it starts to become like really important. And when you, maybe for some of us out there who encounter Christianity or who've like had an experience of the Holy Spirit coming into our lives and embracing faith, you found out that you were, you felt, yes, I'm not everything I wanted to be. And you found out that Jesus was going to solve that. And the Spirit came upon you and you became a follower of Jesus. And you're like, that was sufficient. And then maybe later in life, you're like, wait, like what actually happened there?
Yeah.
Like what was the switch in my soul that flipped when I prayed the prayer, quote unquote, or asked for forgiveness or accepted Jesus in my heart, like whatever the terminology you want to use for salvation. And you started to doubt a little bit, like, how in the world does the cross actually save me?
Yeah.
And save me from who?
Yeah.
Or from what?
Yeah.
And on and on and on. So that's why the reason this topic is so important is it like, it's your salvation.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
And then you think how like, and this is where I think people get a little lost, understandably, it is, and you touched on this, who was I rescued from? Or what was I rescued from?
Yes.
So like with the ransom theory that we began with, at least in some versions of that, there's a debt owed to the devil, to someone. This comes out in some of them. And you see that like in things like Narnia.
Yeah.
Like, why does Aslan die? Well, because Edmund owes a death or a debt to the White Witch, who plays this caricature of the devil. And so he willingly dies so Edmund can go free. So like in some theories, the ransom theory is like it's owed to the devil. In some ways it's owed to God. And then the penal substitution is very much a God demands justice. And so there's a death that is a payment of kinds to
like a
God.
blood payment.
Yeah. And so that theory for some people has been very confusing. You know, someone
Sounds pretty brutal.
once said, like, that theory requires me believing that God died to satisfy God. How does that work? Does that mean that Jesus kind of loves me and his father's still kind of mad at me? Like, how does that translate on a layman's
God's
level?
super duper angry and Jesus jumps in front of us in the last minute and God zaps.
Well, that very much nudges towards they're very different. And so all of these theories, and then you get to Christus Victor, well, Christ defeated death. That's kind of like a thing, not a person. Maybe it's a person, but it like for us, it's a thing. And so that's like, well, was the debt to a thing? Like, how did that work? Like, how did he do that? So all of it moves us around in this spiritual world that we don't fully understand. And we're like, wait, am I over here? Am I over there? And eventually I think people get to this point where like, okay, I'm not going to worry about it too much.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let it go.
Yeah, and so like if you've already sort of embraced faith in Jesus, like maybe your mind is sort of settled on a framework sort of subconsciously and you're like, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
But then I've encountered myself and I've encountered other people in conversation where they're like, that's not sufficient anymore.
Yeah.
Like I need to at least grapple with what's the mechanics of salvation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the problem that's being solved?
Mm-hmm.
How does a cross solve said problem?
Yeah.
And how does a cross, and then there's a time issue.
Uh-huh.
How does a cross 2,000 years ago solve a problem for me today?
And then how does the resurrection fit into all that?
Yeah.
Is it the cross that shines? So like one of the most interesting conversations I've heard in years was between N.T. Wright, legendary evangelical theologian, and a metropolitan or metropolite in the Eastern Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
And so N.T. Wright says to him, what does the cross mean to you? And this guy with a straight face says to him, the cross means nothing. The cross is simply a way to get to resurrection. So for this whole group of the church, again, not necessarily one that we're close to in many ways, is like resurrection is the thing that shines. The cross happened just simply because that's how the Romans killed people that weren't Romans. And that could have been any other way to them, so long as Jesus could rise from the dead. The problem was death, and the answer to death was resurrection.
Yeah.
And the kind of death is immaterial to them.
Yeah.
So again, like, this isn't like us saying like that's right or wrong. That's saying that's how a whole group of people in the church have shaped their theory of atonement over the years. Now, we feel that as people that grew up, maybe you grew up in a church where every Good Friday, once a year, the pastor would get up and in incredible Mel Gibson style detail would go through every awful element of the cross in a way that the New Testament, we would have to say, doesn't do.
Interesting. Yeah.
Just so we could show how central that incredible pain and incredible type of suffering was to salvation. And a group of the church would say, well, no, I mean, it was just simply a thing that they did that would have been no different to
like he could have tripped
the
and fallen
guillotine
and
of the
broke,
French, the guillotine of the French Empire, the what is it, the
electric chair.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of this specific term, but all of those different things, the same, they could easily have been substituted in. Now that's very weird to us as Reformed people that tend to have grown up with a lot of penal substitution. Yeah. Because of the time we were born into.
Yeah. Okay. So we've laid out basically what we've done so far on the show is create more problems for ourselves that we then kind of need to like, no promises. We're not solving this. This is a conversation. I think as a follower of Jesus, it's worthwhile to think on the mechanisms of the cross and of resurrection
Agreed.
ongoingly and have a dialogue with God about that
Yeah.
ongoingly for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And we're not going to solve it today, but I think it would be helpful for us to at least grapple with some of the issues we've laid out. And then we have a question, two questions from the class that I think might help us access that a little bit later as well. So let's deal with some of those things. How do we've already made the case that we kind of need maybe a multiplicity of these models.
Yeah.
What do you think, in your best estimation, what's the mechanisms of the cross and how does it relate to us today?
You mean addressing those theories or just?
Yeah, you can use those theories.
Okay.
Like what actually took place at the cross? Why was the cross necessary? What's the problem being solved?
Yeah.
I just asked you 7 questions.
You did, yeah. And I'm trying to think of the best way to answer them without getting super theological. So I think there's this really strong evidence running through the Old Testament, particularly, that sin is a problem. That there's a piece of sin that can be removed or forgiven, but there's an internal piece that never quite gets dealt with. So there's the individual actions that the sacrifice is for, but then there's also this language in different places that says that there is no sacrifice for this sin. This is beyond any of those things, and it's a deep internal problem that can't ever be just taken away.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I find really interesting and challenging is that Jesus seems to comfortably just forgive sins on earth. He doesn't actually seem to think, and this is pre-cross.
Yeah.
He says, "Son, your sins are forgiven." And so there's this element in the New Testament that I'm like, okay, I'm not sure what to do with that, because Jesus is going around forgiving sins quite happily. He's talking about reconciliation with the Father and things like the prodigal son, this come home invitation. Yeah. And the cross and resurrection haven't happened yet. But it still seems like there's this thread that's run through that feels like Jesus is here to deal with. And so on some level, it feels like the cross is part of that answer. That there's a sin problem that seems like it's dealt with on the cross, and there's a death problem that seems like it's dealt with in the resurrection. Paul even has some language around this, right? He died for our, He died for our justification.
Yeah.
And he rose again for something. What's that piece of language?
I don't know how he phrased it.
Let me look it up because I think it's important.
Yeah, what's interesting...
here we go.
Okay, go ahead.
Maybe this is it. Yeah. So Paul actually just says that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, and that he was buried and he rose again the third day according to the scriptures. He doesn't there pass it out, but that seems to be this thread that runs all the way through. That somewhere on the cross, the sin issue is the thing that is dealt with. And so the interesting thing for me is to try and track for myself and others, how has their relationship changed with sin after their experience of Jesus, whether that's a prayer you prayed early on, whether that's a prayer you prayed later, whether that's a thing that you never consciously did, but you felt like I started following Jesus. Maybe you never was someone who prayed this prayer that gets talked about a lot that isn't found in the New Testament.
Yeah.
But you felt this call to follow Jesus, and you said, I'm going to trust in what he did over what I did. How did our relationship with sin change? I don't know about you, but I felt like I just started to become different. Like I just noticed that the way I behaved had changed, that something had shifted in me.
Yeah.
The 18-year-old that was into all kinds of stuff that I'm not into now was very different than the 19-year-old that had encountered Jesus and started a transformation. So somewhere it feels like, for me in my personal experience, that's how the cross worked.
Yeah.
I went from being a person whose whole life was centered around sin to one whose whole life was centered around how can I live in the way of Jesus. I wasn't always very good at it at times.
Yeah, interestingly, like, I think a transformation was the result for me in a lot of ways too. Now my awareness of more subtle sins increased, so I still feel like a horrific sinner today.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm honest, if you were to look back at like my actual life, some of the things that I don't deal with anymore are, without even thinking about it, now I'm paying attention to more nuanced issues.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm on a journey of
Yeah.
growing a little bit more into the way of Jesus, hopefully, and I'm paying attention to more subtle sins in my soul.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would tend to agree that it's like, and we talked about this last night in Alpha class. I told a story of Rwanda and how there's 200 years of this cycle of sin that culminates in the Rwanda genocide, and how something's got to be done about this problem, right? And so the cross and the arrival of Jesus is entering into human history, dealing with these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he deals with them in a multiplicity of ways.
Yeah.
He sets us a better example.
Okay. Yeah.
He defeats by demonstration the principalities and powers, and that's for me a really important component of atonement, because as I look at human history, I see things like the Holocaust, things like the Rwanda genocide, where human evil almost rises above and becomes a third party.
Yeah.
Think about governments or corporations, government power and corporate power, where the system, the entity itself, imagine a super powerful corporation with exceeding amounts of money, causes the leadership of that organization to sometimes do things that if they didn't have access to this corporate power, they wouldn't be able to do. So it almost takes on a life of its own, where the corporation is almost sentient.
Yeah.
I think when the scriptures talk about the principalities and powers, it's not just talking about spiritual beings like demons and Satan. It's also incorporating these powerful structures that humans create to suppress other human beings. And so the problem of sin is that it gets so big it almost extends beyond individuals into corporate systems and structures. And so there's two main corporate systems and structures that Jesus is grappling with when he's walking the earth. The Roman Empire and the religious, interestingly, the religious systems of the Jewish leadership. And the way he defeats them is he lets himself be consumed by them.
Yeah.
To show us that you don't have to beat corporate power and greed and energy by becoming bigger and badder and scarier. Instead, surrender to God is a maximum weapon.
So one of the
by the way, that's more of a Christus Victor model. Yeah.
So one of the films that does a really interesting job in showing this in real terms is The Matrix.
Okay.
So now you get past the first Matrix and the story continues in a way that doesn't always translate. But for some reason in this first film, it was like somewhere the people that wrote it had the Wachowski brothers had taken on this atonement idea without realizing it.
Yeah.
So in the system, there is the machine, the thing that operates everything.
Yeah.
And then the personification of that is this Agent Smith.
Yeah.
Who can take over anything, who works through every system. He just touches something and it gets infected with him and becomes part of this larger organism that goes anywhere it wants, that operates across everything that it wants to operate with. And this thing kind of is the thing that is operating this matrix that works as like a simulation. So all of this like is this powerful structure that you're describing that infects everything. So imagine a thing that starts as a root and spreads, and every time it kind of splits or forks, another strand takes off, and it only takes in this world one person who's got this infection to come into a company or come into an organization. Suddenly that organization, but this is how powerful it is, suddenly that thing becomes infected with it, and its spread grows and grows and grows till it becomes roots beyond roots beyond roots beyond roots beyond roots. And for some reason they created this image, not talking about theology, but it works perfectly as how, in how this thing has been described. One action starts a chain reaction that builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And Neo is this chosen one that in the end defeats the system by getting inside of the system and exploding it from the inside.
Yes.
So he actually allows himself to be consumed by it. He, in a very visual moment, jumps into the person that represents it, and suddenly there's this explosion that destroys everything from, everything powers down in this moment. The thing ruptures. And that seems to be what this theory is saying, that there's a whole structure that actually gets destroyed, and we're free.
Yeah, and so interestingly, like parts of the Bible that don't get read quite as often, like the book of Revelation or some of the prophetic books, use language that sounds really wacky to us, but if you were thinking of it like a powerful narrative like The Matrix, it would track fine. Like the language of dragons and how this Christ-like figure in the book of Revelations gets like sort of consumed by the dragon and defeats the dragon in so doing. And this is the kind of language Scripture oftentimes uses to describe what Christ accomplishes at the cross, is he says, I will take upon myself. It's almost like N.T. Wright like describes it as almost like Jesus becomes this magnetic figure that sort of draws all of the wickedness and evil like a cloud that descends upon him at the cross, and then try to crush him and do. And then the third day later, he's like, psych. The greatest enemy in the Christus Victor model is the fear of death, not just death, but the fear of death, because it's the thing that causes humans to do the most evil.
Sure.
Like we think it's money and power, but actually if you boil it all the way down, all the way down, all the way down, all the way down, humans just I want me and mine to be safe.
Yeah.
And if mine betray me, I'll reject them. I want me to be safe. And the biggest, baddest, scariest thing that causes us to do insidious things to each other is the fear of death. And if there's a promise of resurrection,
doesn't matter.
You strip death of its power, and you can start doing stuff like being kind at the risk of your own life.
And that's why things like, oh, death, where is your sting?
Oh, grave, where's your victory?
Grave, where is your victory? Are things that we read within the New Testament. Now, to give you another visual of this, because I think the visuals within like stories that we know help us here. That problem you're talking about is really visible in the story Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So without any spoilers, because it was written in 2007, so you've only had nearly 10, 20 years to read it. There's this moment at the end where Voldemort, this personification of evil, kills his most faithful servant from his perspective. And he does it because he believes it's the only way that he can live forever.
Yeah.
And so he actually uses this line where he says, you've been a good servant, Severus, but only I can live forever. Everyone else can be sacrificed so long as I get what I want. That's the humanity at its worst image. That's what we become like. Anyone else except us, so long as I can continue, that's just fine. And then, of course, Harry is the antithesis of that because he has a resurrection stone. And he's like, I can give my life because I know that there is the promise of something else. Yep. So like it's J.K. Rowling really cleverly and intentionally from her perspective. Like she always said, if you're a Christian, the story will not surprise you. Because she weaves these themes through it.
Yeah. Which, okay, zooming out of theology, from a sociological perspective, a psychological perspective, one of the reasons why Christianity compels me is the fact that the best stories, the best narratives that quicken our hearts in human history find grounding and evidence in the story of the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the cross and the resurrection.
Totally. Yeah.
It's almost like God hardwired our brains and our psychologies in such a way to when we see a story like The Matrix or like Harry Potter or something, or we see superhero stories or whatever it may be, something in our souls like quicken. And it's like our subconscious self is saying, yes.
Yeah.
This isn't just a story on a movie screen.
Yeah.
This is a story that actually happened.
Yeah.
And so part of the reason why the cross is so compelling to me, beyond all the theology, is the narrative itself.
Yeah.
I think speaks to humanity at such a fundamental level that we can't even quantify it.
Yeah.
That's the idea of mimetic stories.
Yeah.
The term meme, like memes you see on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever, on Instagram, these memes that sort of like sweep through culture that like affect culture.
Mm-hmm.
Well, an actual meme historically is an image that changes the direction of human history.
Mm-hmm.
The ultimate meme is the cross.
Yeah. And the resurrection.
Yeah. So, all right, a couple more questions to drill into this. And I know, gosh, there's volumes and volumes of theological books that plumb the depths of this topic that we just can't even begin to scratch the surface of. So this feels kind of like a lost cause to even talk about it too much, because you're just like, I feel like we're leaving out so much. But here's a question. Why does following Jesus actually require surrendering anything? Isn't intellectual assent enough?
So I think this one is so intellectual assent is an interesting question. Like intellectual assent to what, I guess. Like, and so if you mean just intellectual assent to the fact that Jesus was a real person who died and maybe rose again, like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean a belief that he did anything for anything.
Okay.
So somewhere the belief part, like we tend to think of, again, this is our culture, belief as like intellectually I can get on board with that idea.
Yeah.
And that's not what the New Testament writers mean by belief. Like, and actually, without spoiling it, this week we're actually going to spend a lot of time on this question, because we've now navigated all the way through John, this book, on Sunday mornings, and all the way through, John's takeaway every week is just like, believe. You read 2 chapters of Matthew, and he's had like 35 takeaways. And John's just got one for 21 chapters. Like, it's
become a joke around the office. We're like, hey, what are you preaching on, Alex? Oh, is it about believing? And we're like, yep.
So we got to this final week where this is where it really talks about it in a strange way that I'm like, I'm just going to actually spend some time talking about what they mean by believe. Because early on, you might say when Jesus calls his disciples and says, believe in me, he actually means something like follow me, live like me, get involved in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then there's this movement later where it clearly becomes believe that I died and rose again. But throughout the New Testament and early church history, it becomes really clear that what believe means for us is a trust. So like, actually, I think when people struggle with believe, one of my encouragements to them is just go through every scripture you're reading and change the word believe to trust. Because it is this action where you are handing over your life and your future to the one who died and rose again.
Yeah.
So some really great language around that is often this language of when you talk about what you think happens after death and where your life is going, you've changed from a first person language to a third person language.
Yeah.
So regularly, if you pose the question like, well, if you were to tell God why you should go to heaven if you died, or some question that sounds almost like a little oversimplified, but let's pick that one because it's easy. Then we're tempted to say things like, well, because I prayed a prayer, because I tried to live the life of Jesus, because I mentally believed or like theologically assented to death and resurrection. But really the trust process is actually saying, because Jesus.
Yeah.
It's actually starting there. Because Jesus did this for me. You become not the subject of the sentence, but you become an object further down in the equation. And so mental assent never gets you there. Mental assent stays with me. It's like because I believe this, because I did this. Whereas the thing that we're talking about, belief, is turning over a life to Jesus in a way that says, okay, Jesus, you're taking care of that part. My part in the equation is to follow you, to get on board with you, to live as you call me to live. And all of that has become possible because of what you did anyway. I was no way equipped to do that. But you, and this thing that I'm trusting you for, have begun to work a different kind of code in me that's unlike the code that we talked about that spreads throughout the earth and causes damage and harm. That's why Christians find themselves doing surprising things.
Which is...
They're like, how did I do that? That's not me.
Yeah.
You know, Malcolm Gladwell, the great like historian, writer, macro thesis guy, said he was first pulled back to Christianity because he watched a couple whose daughter had just been killed forgive the couple, forgive the person that did it. And he's like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
That's not the systems process. The systems process stands in front of them at the court case and says, you've got hell waiting for you, and I'm going to enjoy every moment.
Yeah, this came up in last night's thing at Alpha where he shared the story of Corey Timboom forgiving her perpetrator, and she says, I couldn't forgive him.
Sure.
All I had was coldness in me.
Yeah.
And yet he could in me forgive him. And so like she let that haunting thing where we listen to the recording of her speaking these words. That's exactly what Alex is talking about. It's that Christ does it in us. Yeah.
So mental assent doesn't work because it's still a first person action.
Well, and also to get far be it for us to be even able to do what I'm suggesting. If you try and imagine for a moment God's agenda with humanity, and then think about the mental assent question.
Sure.
All right. So the question, again, just by way of reminder, is why do we have to surrender anything? Isn't mental assent sufficient? Well, Alex said, well, no, it's not sufficient for one reason, because mental assent doesn't get us to that place where we're trusting in his work on our behalf. Another way of getting at the same question is think about God's agenda for humanity. He wants his creation to function with goodness and beauty and delight for his creatures, both for all of his cosmos, for the earth, for the creatures on the earth, and for humanity. This is what he wants. He designed us to be this beautiful expression of his goodness and beauty. We jack it up horrifically. Fill in all the examples we've already talked about: Holocaust, abuse, destruction, pain, evil. And so if mental assent was sufficient, where we just say, like, I believe a set of propositional statements about theology, does that transform his creation into this beautiful system and structure?
Sure. No.
It's just a bunch of mental stuff that says I make an intellectual idea about some theological propositions. God has no interest in that.
Sure.
What he wants is for us to say, you know what? The way that humans do things is not good and bad for both us and for the cosmos. What you say is a better way of doing things. I will therefore surrender my ideas of how to behave and surrender to yours. And then that has the potential to transform all of the cosmos back towards where he has. Which leads to a question that came up at my table.
I would just finish with this idea, that scriptural idea around this is James, who says, like, something like this. I'm going to paraphrase. You say you believe in God. You do well. So do the demons, and even tremble at his name. Like, so like the darkness thing you're talking about, the system that's opposed to God, the things behind that know that Jesus rose from the dead. They can mentally assent to all of those things, but even tremble at the idea, the name of God, but they're far from
surrendering.
The Christian story, they're far from surrender. They are the perpetuators of that system. And so it's just another example of why there's more than mental assent.
So a question came up at my table. Then, okay, if the cross accomplished all this and set a new potential trajectory for humanity, why does it seem like the world's almost worse now than it was prior to the cross?
And I think you could take that a number of directions. I think you could take it to the failure of Christians to live out the way of Jesus in the world, that we are the plan and we have not often done that well. You could also take it down the direction of, you were also really good at overlooking huge periods of history that were pretty horrific. And that actually there's lots of ways where the world has got a lot better. And usually the heartbeat of that has been Christianity. Like, if you take away things that Christianity was the impetus from, you probably have no schools, no hospitals, no music, or at least no music as we know it today. Like that's been the impetus of a whole bunch of stuff. So we're surprisingly unaware of just what Christianity has given the world. And then on the other hand, this piece that, the system continues to fight back. The thing that we've been talking about continues to grow and spread in a way that is incalculable as well. So I think that all comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have, interestingly enough, and we're going to actually talk about this in Alpha. I think the last week we'll spend our entire time talking about the church. And some of the struggles of what is the church, what should the church be. But to get at this question, why in the world does it sometimes feel like things are just as bad or sometimes even worse than prior to the cross? If the cross was this iconic moment, don't you expect to see some shifts? So Alex gave us some answers to that. But interestingly, some of the bad things in human history post the cross were done by the church. So interestingly, Christians or people who claim to be Christians are not immune to the systems and structures of the world.
Oh, absolutely no.
And so things like the Crusades and things like the abuse of power by religious leaders, things like all of these sorts of things are examples of when someone who claims the name of Jesus behaves exactly like the systems and principalities and powers that Christianity and Jesus was against. And that, to me, is the biggest, scariest rebuttal to Christianity that there is. It's not, I mean, that's probably the biggest struggle I have personally with Christianity. Yeah. It's how easy it is for the quote unquote church to get swept up and just to behave exactly like, and leverage a salvation as a weapon of war rather than as a weapon of mercy and grace.
But this is like, so I would share that it's super hard to watch.
Yes.
And a thing that we're as south as a little part of the kingdom are trying to work against.
Yep.
But like, these are Jesus' words when someone asked him, will those who are saved be few? In Luke 13. And Jesus says, strive to enter through the narrow door, because I tell you, many I tell you will seek it and will not be able. And by able, he doesn't mean like it's not open to them, but will not go through the narrow door that he's talking about.
Yeah.
Like, so he has no problem with the fact that it's really easy to say, Lord, Lord, and to become someone who uses great Christian language to even like, and Paul like talks about this as well. He says, lest I, having preached to others, fall short.
Yeah.
Like, there's a real awareness that there'll be people that will say, I'm a Christian, and not live like it at all.
Yeah. Just because you can make a theological statement of faith, call yourself a Christian, if the way of Jesus isn't gradually and continually growing in your life, there is not a lot of evidence that you're actually inside the way of Jesus.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's terrifying.
It is. Now at the same time, like, I don't want to say that just because you are like there's reasons that people don't grow.
Yeah.
But I think like you can take things like the Crusades and look at a whole story of Christianity that was driven by something other than the message of Jesus, yet they marched with this golden cross of Christ in front of them.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm not saying that we're talking about apples and apples, but that is Jesus' story. And our job is to continue to move our life from first person to third person, to say that everything about me is centered around what Jesus has done. And the life that I now live, that's Paul's language. Like, I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I that live, but Christ lives in me. And the life I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me.
Yeah.
Like, that's his definition of what being a Christian looks like. And it's a high calling.
And then Alex also alluded to this, but there's some historians who've done some really good work. If you want to look at the work of Tom Holland is one. It's kind of a contemporary example. He sort of blipped on the radar in the last 5 or so years with some of his books. His book is what, Dominion?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Who makes a case that prior to the cross, most ancient civilizations actually glorified violence and power and abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to say, I'm awesome, you tell everyone how many people you've raped and how many people you've killed.
Yeah. And
everyone's like, if you had more than the next guy, then you are the hero of the story.
Look at me. Yeah.
And some of his work is because he's an expert on the Roman civilization. And his work says something took place with the Judeo-Christian movement of the early church, where now all of us think that an abusive, powerful personality is a bad thing.
Yeah.
He says, if you think abuse of power is bad, you are thinking like a Christian.
Yeah.
All of Western civilization has shifted its value structures based upon Judeo-Christian
and that doesn't
systems.
mean that people that call themselves Christians don't do those things.
Yeah.
But you listen to almost anyone that does that, they'll try and color in like why it's okay in this case.
Yeah.
Like why this thing of violence did this. Like it was like it was means to an end. Even the people that we look at and say, man, what is going on with this person? They're like, oh, there was a reason for it. Like, you know, this is why it's excusable for me or in this circumstance.
Yep.
Like, you know, so we're deeply aware that once we get to this point of saying, yeah, violence for its own sake, people look at us like, wait, what's wrong with you? That's messed up. No world leader gets to where they are by saying, yeah, I just love violence. I just love like this do what you want world where like survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. Like even you go back to like our example always of the worst of the worst. Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
Like how does he caricature what he's doing? Oh, we're just creating more space to make sure people have enough room to live. Those people will be moved somewhere else. They're going to be taken care of. Everything's going to be fine for them. Probably going to be better off. Like, you know, but, you know, this is just important for us to all continue to live happily ever after.
Yeah. His vision was to try and create utopia.
Yeah. And actually there's all these Germans that when they find out what's happened are like, wait, what? Like we had no idea. Like Hitler's still sending families on cruises in the Mediterranean in 1944. Like, right. And they're like, wow, this guy has solved it. So even the worst of the worst caricature themselves is like, no, I'm trying to help improve everyone's quality of life.
And he believed it.
To a degree, yes. Yeah.
Sure, so it's like, it's not just that, we could ramble on and on and on, but the point of all of this is, there is a shift if you study history where Judeo-Christian values have shifted civilization. And yet there's still crazy examples of human brokenness, like the Holocaust, like the Rwanda genocide, where it's like, oh, humanity, we're so still so broken.
Mm-hmm.
There's been more deaths because of war in the last, several decades than there ever has been before.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to quantify, but that's not actually foreign to the story of God and it's his relationship with humans.
Mm.
All throughout the Old Testament, God's work took place amongst what he called a remnant.
Yeah.
In every season,
always
throughout the entire Old Testament, even the people that he selected, the Jewish people, they did horrific things, and he preserved a remnant, the seed that's deposited inside of time that will continually try and pursue his way rather than the way of the world.
And so you look at that through history. Where does it survive in different places? Like through the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages? Like the remnant survives in monasteries. Like it gets passed down by this group of people that go into these enclaves and they hold on to this thing that stays fairly consistent and pure.
Yeah.
It's for those reasons, for people like that we have manuscripts dating back to like whole manuscripts of the New Testament dating back to the 300s. We have snippets dating back from the turn of that century. Like all of this consistent historical story. Like the reason we can stand here today and say, oh, we have a fairly good idea what the first Christians believed is because of a remnant like that.
Yep.
Even when you watch the rest of the world and you're like, what are you guys doing? Like this looks nothing like the thing we were given. There's a group of people that hold faithful to it. And then at the right time, the doors open and suddenly the thing takes off and just catches fire again. Like God preserves it. And he seems to do that consistently.
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like there's 35 more questions that we may have actually just created more questions than we answered, but this is the nature of this topic. Salvation is a huge thing. Well, it's of such critical importance, and it's complicated. So, yeah.
We didn't even get to like Paul's idea of justification, righteousness.
Yeah.
Which, is another whole thing. Like, what does he mean by righteousness? Does he mean that God has made us righteous? Do we have the righteousness that God himself has? Like all of those different things. And so a really helpful thing I think is to remember is this. Regularly, when these New Testament writers talk about what's happened, who God is, we assume that they have the ability to give us the whole picture.
Yeah.
And that's just not what they think they're doing. That's not, and actually, in fact, it's more than not what they think they're doing. It's actually what they're saying they can't do. So when Paul says things like, we see through a glass darkly, one day we'll see face to face, he's like, we're trying to describe the mysteries of God. And there's a limit on that. Even when it's a spirit-given thing, you can't on paper describe the living God who made everything and everyone, who owns everything, and is the source behind everything we see. So they say things like, God is like a father. They don't mean that's everything that God is.
Yeah.
They just mean that describes some of the things, the qualities of God that are passed on to us when we're at our best. He says that God is like a mother hen that gathers his children to her chicks. He's not saying that God is that. He's saying that, no, that's how God works. He says God is a judge. It's like, but that's like him taking a human image and saying, this is kind of a thing that you see going on here. But he's not saying he is that. So like we assume when we read those words that it's an exact definition or description. It's like, no. I'm trying to give you a facet. I'm trying to help you see multiple little snippets of this thing. When they describe the story of what Jesus has done, they're like, Jesus fixed something. His work, his death and resurrection did something in the universe. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, but they can never get the whole thing. This is a story that will reverberate throughout the universe for all of time.
Yeah.
And beyond time. And so if it's this, as small as we can write down on paper in a language that has a fraction of the words that we have today, it's not a big enough story.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about the gospel, the word gospel just means good news, is that it's as vast as we're talking about, and yet at the same time, it's simple enough that a little child can understand that God loves you and that he loves you so much that he couldn't possibly stand letting you languish inside of the broken systems and structures of this world. And so he came to die, to create the potential for new systems and new structures, which is what scriptures call his kingdom, for you.
Yeah.
And if his death, Romans tells us that he demonstrated his love for us in that while we were still sinners, not even while we'd made any mental ascents, while we were running as fast as we could the opposite direction, while we were still sinners, Christ died for you. That's the message that's simple enough for a child to understand.
Yeah.
And then the mechanisms of that is complicated enough to confound your mind for a lifetime.
And so one of the things I think is really helpful as maybe a final thought is that sometimes when we get lost in all of these different things, it's really easy to get a little stuck. One of the things I think is really helpful is to take a simple story like maybe like the prodigal son story. I have Rembrandt's painting on my wall where this prodigal son is welcomed home by his father. And I think the image is this one of invite. But it turns out it's really easy to either stay in the far country, trying to survive, eke out a living. It's really easy to stay on the outside of town, trying to come up with all sorts of excuses as to why the father should let you back in. It's really easy to be the older son, like standing on the outside of the circle, outside of relationship, bitter because of all the other people that feel like, they got in too easily.
Yeah.
To live in the third person requires walking home and coming to the conclusion that the only reason you're there is because your father is awfully good and kind.
Yeah.
And that he's taken care of it. And so somewhere like that's the narrative that allows us to let go of some of these things that we have to figure out why. Why is he so kind to us? What's his agenda? Like, why has he let us in? And actually, there is no answer to that. What did it cost him? We don't know. Like, but to say simply, he invited us home. Yeah. And I'm going to accept that invitation with all of my heart.
Yeah.
And that's the goodness of the story.
All right. Well, on that note, please do send us additional questions. It would really help this podcast if you subscribe on YouTube, give us some feedback, rate the podcast on whatever your podcast service is. It's been a long time since I've asked for those things. Look at me being a podcaster.
Wow.
Goodbye.